All right, hey everyone, I'm Brad Smith, Principal Software Engineer and Dev Team Lead for CloudGrade, or the CloudMeter project. I've been with Red Hat for the last 5 years, and I've been working in or around CloudGrade for most of that time.
And hi, I'm MB Pierce. I joined Red Hat as a quality engineer working with Brad and the CloudMeter team in 2018. I've since switched roles and am now leading an engineering team working on several projects within Insights. Okay, I'd like to invite you to join me in a little mental exercise. I'm going to ask you to take what you know about life, how things work, the universe, and suspend your understanding of reality for a minute. Take a couple of minutes with me to use your imagination. Imagine that you're a part of a team of smart, hardworking, thoughtful folks who are good at what they do and who are invested in collaboration and constant incremental improvement. And imagine that your team is working on a project that is making meaningful improvements to and having a positive impact on some piece of the world that you care deeply about. So far, so good, right? Hopefully, none of us have had to stray too far from our reality yet. Okay, let's keep imagining. Who's on this team? There's a PM who regularly brings new feature ideas to the table, hashes out the details with the team, and watches as new features are quickly brought to life and released to customers for feedback. There are developers who, as soon as they're satisfied with their code, they hit a button, grab a beverage of choice, sit back, and watch as changes flow through the process and are automatically deployed to customers. There are dev and QE managers who identify and quickly address potential blockers, which is easy because communicating with stakeholders is baked into the processes. And then there's you. As a quality engineer, you contribute your insights, perspectives, and concerns for quality, stability, and testability well before development ever starts. And because of the consistent, thorough communication among the whole team, you know crucial details about inputs, outputs, and endpoints. So you can start automating tests as soon as development starts, or even beforehand. Okay, have you had enough? Does it sound too outlandish to be even remotely possible? Well, what if I told you that for the most part, it's already happening? My first experience with this process was when I worked with the CloudMeter team. Brad, tell us how y'all do it.
All right, thanks for that setup, MB. That is a pretty high bar, but I do like to think that my team gets most of that stuff right most of the time at least. So how do I think we accomplish it? Well, a key phrase you just said I think captures the essential part: constant incremental improvement. Externally, that may mean delivering regular releases to our customers, and internally, it means developing habits to keep each other informed and up to date. I believe that adapting your team's development methodology to implement CI and CD processes and their tools will help you achieve these kinds of goals. Now, imagine most people think about the automation tooling side of things when they hear CI and CD. And yes, the technology is an important part of the solution, but I believe it's only a small part of the bigger picture. Much more critical for finding success is having your team members embracing this mindset of constant incremental improvement and working in a way that means that you'll have new features and new bug fixes actually ready to release regularly, quickly, and easily. Let's get that technology part of releasing out of the way first, though, because I'm sure everyone's wondering about that. Then I'll focus on how we embrace this mindset to enable a rapid release cycle. Like I'm sure many others here, we operate a family of containerized deployments. We have all your typical web service stuff: API service, task scheduling, async functions, a database, cache, queues, the works. For deploying and managing all of that, we've actually been doing continuous integration and continuous delivery for years. We have fully automated processes, starting with pull requests, deploying and running tests in ephemeral and stage environments, and getting deployed all the way to production. It only takes about half an hour from merging a PR in our repo to being live in the production Red Hat OpenShift cluster. And since that's all so quick and easy, we just don't do scheduled releases. When we think development of some feature or bug fix is done, we just merge it, and moments later, it's on its way to production. That means we might release 3 times in a day, or we might not release for 3 straight weeks. It all just depends on what finishes when, and by and large, there's never been a problem with that. So technically, what's happening here? In our pull requests, our project has your typical unit testing and linting jobs defined in the project to run as GitHub Actions. We also have this external Jenkins job managed by App Interface running on CIX. That job builds a new container image from the PR's branch, tags and pushes up to Quay.io, reserves an ephemeral namespace, deploys the image to that namespace, then it runs the IQ integration tests alongside it. Once all the checks are green and we're ready to merge to master, another Jenkins job on CIX is triggered by the GitHub webhook. That job builds and pushes what will eventually be our new release image to Quay.io. The new image is deployed to the stage environment, and once that's up, a short-lived pod deploys to stage to run IQE's smoke tests now against the new deployment. When those tests succeed and the job completes, App Interface updates itself and the new image rolls out to production, completing the entire process. Within our init containers, we run database migrations and an Ansible playbook to make sure that any external resources like AWS S3 buckets and SQS queues exist and are configured appropriately. This means we never manually fiddle with the databases or some special configs during the releases to stage, prod, or anywhere else. Bad kitty. That probably sounds like a lot of moving pieces, all right? But know that we got here by working iteratively, one small piece at a time, and by working across multiple disciplines. A huge thanks and credit goes to the App SRE team and the core console.platform teams for building much of the wiring that we are now relying on here. So, how could you start building something like this today? Well, this is where I want to finally get back to the title of our presentation, that the journey to CI and CD begins with people, not code. And let's start from the very beginning, introducing a new feature through our development process. Our friendly neighborhood product owner comes up with some new RHEL usage report for our customers, which is right in line with the kind of work that we do. Every week, our team gets together to review our priorities and to discuss any new stories and bugs just like this. But we want everyone here, all contributors of CloudGrade, are present and active in this conversation. That's all the devs and the QEs, often their managers and the stakeholder, participating so that we can really define this request. It's never just the PO or manager sticking a one-line issue somewhere in Jira or GitHub. That's nightmare fuel, and it's never going to be good enough for us. We want everyone to leave this conversation equipped with the knowledge so that they can confidently start that work as soon as we leave the meeting. And when I say everyone, I really do mean everyone. For this reporting idea, QE might immediately start outlining test cases or synthesizing data before an API developer wrote a single line of their code. Now, the screenshots I'm clicking through here are typical of issues we've defined in these backlog refinement conversations. And yeah, there's a lot of words in there. Detailed summary statements, specific acceptance criteria, big list of assumptions and questions. Now, these aren't so long just because I'm a guy who likes typing a lot. No, these are so long because we had the devs and the QEs and other people in the room with different knowledge, different perspectives, actively exchanging questions and ideas. Those definitions just grow organically to capture all those questions and ideas. And sure, this exercise might seem expensive in terms of attendance, but it's an investment, and I believe it pays handsomely and saves time and frustration later when we don't have to ask and wait around for answers to questions like, hey, what does this mean? Or could I do this? Or does any of this even make sense? That could come up hours, days, or worse, weeks later into development. Now I'm sure you're thinking, okay, Brad, great. What does that have anything to do with CI and CD? Let's put those two terms aside for a moment and let me ask you a different question. What is required to confidently and reliably merge code and release it to the world? Those are your prerequisites for a release. It's not just the literal merging of one branch to another. It's not just QE enabling some new tests. It's not just me building an artifact somewhere. It's really about getting all your contributors, dev, QE, UX, docs, completing everything together. The way we see it, we're not done until everyone's parts are done. It doesn't matter if my new API is ready on day 1, if QE doesn't know what it does until day 5, and oops, I might have missed a use case that was only found on day 10, but hey, I'm busy with something else, and I can't come back to it until day 15. But hey, it looks like the UI guys haven't even figured out what it's supposed to look like until day 20. We've all experienced some issues drag out like this, I'm sure, maybe more often than we'd like to admit. So here's where the people part of our thesis really starts to shine. If we work together and we have a common understanding of what we're building from the start, then we're much more likely to complete it together and be confident in what we've just built. So let's assume that we just had that conversation. Everybody knows what we're building on day 0 because we've just answered so many great questions during refinement. How do we actually start on it? Who starts first? Well, any of us could start first, as long as we're open and communicating with each other. For instance, on day 0, QE picks up a new issue and they start building their tests. But I expect them to tell the rest of us at our daily stand-ups what they're starting on. That might prompt a backend developer like me to say, oh, hey, I need to start working on the API for that soon. And it works exactly the same with the roles reversed. As a backend dev, whenever I start a new issue, I'm going to tell my team and try to coordinate with anyone else who might be involved so that we can parallelize our work. If you like Gantt charts, think of it this way. You're turning the development cycle from some stretched out span like this to a nice overlapping stack like this. Again, maybe an exaggeration, but it certainly feels about right to me. Now, with the non-technical act of rearranging how we as people are working together and communicating with each other, your team starts to demonstrate this constant part of the constant incremental improvement, to say nothing about whatever build or release pipeline that you might have thought were required. So the second word in that phrase was incremental. And that needs another working strategy, but it's still something that's compatible with everything I've discussed so far. For that, I'm thinking about the CI or continuous integration half of CI/CD. In any setting with more than one engineer, you need to easily and frequently share or integrate new code with each other and the repository. That's pretty much the basic definition of continuous integration, as long as the frequently part is on the order of hours to days, not weeks to sprints. In practice, though, I'm not just thinking about the repository here, I'm also integrating with other services, other APIs, and clients, and I consider QE's tests to be one of my services clients. But why is continuous integration suddenly important to talk about here? Well, let's continue that new usage report request from earlier. Thinking about the dev side, I'm probably gonna have to build a new API endpoint. It'll take some dates and other inputs. It'll return some structured JSON or CSV. It might require some database migrations. There'll be some new calculation logic somewhere, and maybe we'll need some new scheduled tasks for it all. Now, I'm gonna build all of this the old-fashioned way in one long-running branch. So this issue is well defined since we covered it in backlog refinement. And since devs and QEs were participating there, everyone's pretty confident about what we're expected to build and how we're going to do it. So my QE partner and I are both starting on day 0. Then I go heads down on my part. Before long, I'm touching dozens of files, hundreds of lines of code, just hacking away. And as I'm wrapping up, a couple of weeks have passed. But I realize now that my QE partner has been blocked for a while, waiting for me to give them something, anything to actually test. But I couldn't. My work wasn't done yet. So I might think my work is done now. But if my QE partner is just starting to run tests, it might be a few more days before they discover some bugs in my changes. And by then, I may have moved on to something else. And now I have to context switch back. Everything's slowing down again, and it feels like nothing actually improved. So as a contributor who tries to be a good team player, I need to recognize that building everything in one shot is often a misguided approach. We need to evolve the way we think about changes and how we approach workloads to recognize complexity and become eager to break big changes like this into smaller ones that we can complete relatively quickly and iterate on rapidly. Each of us needs to understand that the longer I take to finish everything like this, with every file I touch, with every line that I edit, I'm making it harder for future me and everyone around me to integrate my changes and keep going forward. Going back to that list of mine, I see every one of these things as an incremental improvement that brings some value of its own. Each one of these at least should have its own pull request, be tested and be merged, maybe even released. But wait, I can already hear someone asking, how does just adding a new API endpoint bring any value without the report data that would come out of it much later in the process? Well, it might not bring value to our external customers, but I think it has value for my blocked QE friend. Now they'll have a live endpoint to verify. Sure, maybe it only returns a 200 OK, but that's a lot better than nothing. They can verify that the endpoint is in the right place, and they can verify that their own tests are able to reach it, and that is meaningful progress. If I keep integrating small changes like this, and they keep coming up with tests as we go, we will find and fix any bugs much sooner, and we will likely deliver the whole feature to the customer much faster. And sometimes these incremental changes can be trivially small, which is perfectly fine too. During a recent code review discussion, I noticed another developer was adding a new configuration behavior to their branch. I suggested that new config could roll out well before the rest of their code, which might not be done for another few weeks. So they made a PR. They pulled out one commit affecting 2 lines of code from their work in progress. And hey, we merged it and we shipped it. Everything was great. That's all there really is to continuous integration. It's not hard to make it happen. It just requires that each of us as contributors keep asking ourselves, have I built something here that might already have some value to somebody? And to be disciplined enough to notice and catch each other from falling into the easy and sometimes very tempting trap of just disappearing for a while, implementing all your brilliant ideas in one go. Now, for people who are just starting to try CI, I would urge caution not to stress out over trying to commit and merge something every single day. I only commit code that I'm reasonably confident actually works. And that usually means writing and updating a unit test or capturing a live demo. And then I only merge it when I think someone might actually be able to use it. I do not want to see whip commits or things with stubbed out debug scaffolding. I don't want to see commits that might reduce our test coverage. These small incremental PRs, they should be treated like any others. They still undergo code review, and they still require all the same PR checks to pass. We're still not allowed to introduce regressions here just because they're smaller. And although I would like to think that every project has thorough PR checks like ours, they're not really a hard requirement for practicing continuous integration. Just try to use good judgment. If you're wary about something you've carved off, ask around for colleagues to give it an earnest code review and actually engage with their feedback. Code reviews should always be a place of learning for both sides. And if you're getting into the habit of making these commits and your PRs are relatively small, then a code review will only take a few minutes. All right, I promise I'm almost done here, but there's still a couple of small important source control habits I haven't mentioned, and you might have already guessed them if you're particularly savvy with Git. One is that our main master branch is always treated as stable and production ready. We enforce branch protection rules for all these things, basically saying you have to use PRs, another team member has to approve it, and the tests have to pass. These rules are especially critical for us because we have CD following so quickly after CI. All of these small PRs I've been talking about are built almost immediately and rolled out to production. Now, even if you don't yet have a deployment automation like we do, it's still probably a really good idea to start these habits now because you're definitely going to want them later. The second point is that we don't ever actually merge, or rather we don't have any merge commits, which is also something we enforce via repo settings. All of our PRs must either cleanly squash into one commit to add on top of master, or they must cleanly rebase all of their commits ahead of master. That's a really weird rule, right? Well, we have lots of PRs for a project of our relatively small stature. About 1,300 have merged by 23 contributors over the last 5 years. And when you have that many branches, if you're using merge commits, the history gets ugly fast, and they can become a real challenge if you ever need to isolate exactly when and where a bug started using tools like git bisect. Now, by refusing merge commits, CloudArray's main branch history is one straight line. We know unambiguously exactly what precedes what. That's us on the bottom, by the way, and that's actually another console.service repo on top, but they'll remain nameless. So now I need to integrate these changes that just landed on master into my branches just as frequently. So part of my routine is that I git fetch and git rebase master anytime I come back from a meeting or anytime I come back from a break to make sure that my branches also have clean histories and they have nothing in them that conflicts with master. I could go on a whole other talk about how Rebase is this fascinating and powerful tool, but for now, I'm just going to recommend that you do some independent research based on what I've said here. All right, all that being said, I want to reiterate our title once more. The journey to CI and CD begins with people, not code. Everything I've talked about are things that every one of us can do to deliver incremental improvements more regularly, with less effort, with less stress, and get closer to the supposed benefits of fully automated CD to prod without actually building that release pipeline. Even if, for all time, you're manually building and releasing artifacts on the very last step, if you embrace the ideas and strategies I've described here in your team's development processes, I am confident that you will find yourselves moving much closer to that constant incremental improvement promised land that sounded so nice when MB described it at the start. Whew.
Okay, that's a great story, Brad. Thanks for sharing all of it. But the realist in me has some pressing questions.
Okay, sure. Go right ahead.
How often are you actually releasing to prod? Like, how long do your PRs sit open?
All right, how long do our PRs sit open? On the outside, I'd say sometimes a few days, maybe a week, but they're usually only open that long if there are weird environment problems going on, or if there's an unusually big change that we're just taking our time to review and provide some good feedback. Much more often than that, it's usually on the order of a few hours from the time that someone has asked for a review to when we've actually approved it and probably merged it. Let's see, as for prod releases, since our CD automation triggers on any change in the master branch, sometimes we really may actually release a prod multiple times a day, probably about an hour apart. I know we've released 3 or 4 times a day before. It all really depends on what work might be in flight that day.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. QE can never keep up with that kind of pace.
Oh yeah, I hear you. But hopefully you're just still thinking the old serialized approach, where you're waiting for the dev to finish something, they pitch an artifact over the fence, and then you begin testing on it. If dev and QE are actually working in lockstep, and especially if you're releasing only smaller incremental updates, then this whole keeping up problem should just go away. There's less delay between the parts, and there are fewer changes to test with each release. If it is still a problem keeping up with even small changes, then I suspect that either your team isn't communicating as well as you think they are, or maybe you just don't have enough QEs. Take a look at your dev to QE people ratio. If you've got 3, 4, 5 devs per 1 QE, then yeah, the process changes are only going to help so much. You probably need to have a hard conversation with management to try to bring that part of the equation into a healthier balance.
Okay, I'm sold. But how do I go about convincing the rest of my team that it's worth the initial investment of time and effort to make this a reality?
All right, that right there is the million-dollar question. But first, I would underscore that figuring out this whole people stuff thing is not a one-time upfront cost. It's better to frame this goal as we're trying to develop new habits, and we're trying to change how we work every single day. That kind of thing doesn't happen with the flip of the switch. There's just too much muscle memory to overcome. But all of these habits, they begin with simple conversations. Any of us can start them. Start asking questions. Are you surprised to hear about an issue that someone's working on? Ask them about it. Did you learn something? If so, take a note and put the note in the issue. You've just expanded its definition, just like we do in backlog refinement. Do you feel like you have a colleague who's been toiling away on one issue for a really long time? Ask them about it. Is there anything of possible value that they have accomplished so far that could get merged in ahead of the rest without waiting for everything they think needs to be 100% complete? If so, great, you're now one step closer to practicing CI. Be inquisitive, plant the seeds of these good habits yourself, but importantly, be honest and upfront about it. Let the group know if you think their definitions are too thin. Ask publicly if you can test something before the developer thinks they're finished. Try to demonstrate small but constant incremental improvement to the development process itself, and hopefully your colleagues will start to see the value that you are now adding, and hopefully they'll get more involved themselves.
Okay, well, I don't want to use up all the Q&A time, so let's turn this over to the live audience. What questions do y'all have?